Welcome, everybody, to another edition of The Good Book Club. We are very excited today about the book that we're reading and what we're going to be covering. So if we can go to our next slide, I have not asked anyone to read our mission statement. I have to say it's daylight savings or the opposite of daylight savings. Whatever it is, the time is different, so we're all a little groggy. So I'm going to go ahead and read our mission statement this morning. We always start out each meeting with this just so that we can remember our purpose of our book club. The Good Book Club was created to bring together nuanced Mormons, post-Mormons, and others with a shared interest in Mormonism. We are introspective, critical thinkers seeking to learn, connect, and build relationships through the catalyst of literature. We welcome all who are searching for a safe space to share authentic thoughts, feelings, and ideas through open dialogue and shared experiences relative to Mormon culture. As we deconstruct previous beliefs, we encourage all to find happiness in the process of discovering new religious ideologies, spirituality, and life philosophies. So I love that statement. I say it every time, but I do love it. So we want to go through a couple things that were on the radar last month, things that we did. A few of our book club members were able to attend an amazing panel called Unveiling Dr. Clandestine. We got to meet and talk to the amazing Sandra Tanner. This it's kind of too complicated to go into probably right here, but it's a very interesting chapter in early post-Mormon history. You might recognize that red book there that the Tanners put out in the 60s. It was featured in Under the Banner of Heaven. It was that book that was on the seat of the car when Detective Pyrie had kind of had his faith crisis meltdown. So back in the 60s, when that book came out, a church historian wrote a little and published a little pamphlet. You can see that there. That's an actual copy of one of them refuting this book. And then the Tanners, of course, wrote something refuting him. So it's a very interesting cloak and dagger kind of scenario. On Mormon Stories podcast, just last week, they did a whole episode on that. So if you want to look that up, it's a super fascinating conversation. And also more information can be found in the book Lighthouse, which is the biography of Sandra Tanner. We've talked about that before at book club. I would highly recommend everybody reading that too. So kind of an interesting situation if you guys want to dive in. We also last month had the amazing Dr. Randy Bell on to talk about his book, Post-Traumatic Thriving. That virtual meeting can be found under the featured tab, the video library on our book club page. And it can also be found just if you go to YouTube and you search the Good Book Club, all of our meetings are there. So you can look that up if you had missed that, because it was really, really awesome. And another great book to read. Put it on your list if you haven't had a chance. So let's talk about books that events that are coming up for the book club. There's always something. So I want to draw everybody's attention to Thrive Unite 2023. This is a Thrive meeting that is held everywhere in the world, and it's on the same day, Saturday, March 18th. So no matter where you are, you can go to thrivebeyondreligion.com and you can try to find a Thrive meeting that is near you. If you happen to be in Utah, I know there's one in Ogden. The one in North Utah County is the one I'm going to be going to. It's in Lehi, and they actually asked me to MC it for some reason. And we're having the amazing Dr. Hassan on to talk about cult mind control. So if you're interested in participating in the Universal Thrive Day, look it up on that website and see if you can find one near you that you can go to. It's going to be really awesome. Let's see, as far as what the book club is doing itself, we are finally having another brew and chew. This is when we get together in person in Utah, because we do seem to have a lot more members now in Utah than we had in the past. So we are going to be going to a Utah pagan market, which will be really fun. It's in Sandy, and there's a coffee shop, and we're just going to kind of gather and pick up some pagan paraphernalia if you need any, maybe a Viking stein or something. And we're going to talk and chat, and that'll be on Sunday, March 26th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So if you can join us for that, please do that. And then that very same night, we have a lot going on that day. A lot of the book club members, we've gotten tickets to this Fresh King Benjamin. He's raised in polygamy, and he does comedy about it, probably to work through the trauma. Anyway, this is going to be at Jordan Landing Wise Guys Comedy Club, and you can go to wiseguyscomedy.com and get your tickets for that. And we're all just going to kind of meet up and laugh together. So I think that'll be really fun. All again on Sunday, March 26th. So as far as what's coming up virtually for the book club, the amazing Dr. John Knight Lundwall is going to be talking to us about cultural astronomy. He is, I can't even really go into what this all means. He is absolutely fascinating, and we'll be putting some more information out via email and on Facebook. But this is going to be a do not want to miss presentation of his work on just basically how the early Fremont Indians created these petroglyphs and what they have to do with the solar system and light. And it's going to be incredible. And this will be on Tuesday, April 11th at 7 p.m. It's just one of our bonus events. So no book associated with that one. And then this is coming up on Tuesday, May 2nd. I don't know if you've looked at the news lately, but this amazing book, I have it already, called From Mormon to Mermaid. Was written by this just lovely, lovely woman named Lorelei Kay, who I've kind of gotten to know a little bit as I'm talking to her about that. It has received some awards in the last month, and so it's kind of back on the radar, even though it was written a few years ago. It's from Mermaid. Okay, I just made up a new word, Mermaid. I told you it was early. From Mormon to Mermaid, One Woman's Voyage from Oppression to Freedom. And you guys can pick up this book. It's not necessary to read the book to attend the event, but it's a quick read, and she's an excellent author. It's a really wonderful read, and she's going to come and talk to us about her book, and this will be in May. So plenty of time to add that for bonus reading if you guys would like to. So perfect. Other reading opportunities. As a lot of you know, I also help John DeLynn with his Mormon Stories book club, and we are reading Conspiracy, Why the Rational Believe the Irrational, with the incredible Michael Shermer, and he is going to be joining us on the program. So more extra reading, if you guys want to grab that, that's coming up at the end of April, and we'll be talking with Michael. So I highly recommend this book too. Let's very quickly go over other media in the radar really fast. We also have the Good Media Club. This is where we kind of curate information about other things, film, podcasts, movies, things that have to do with Mormonism, not book related, but media related. And you can find that on Facebook if you want to jump over there. We kind of talk about that. We also have the Good Book Club podcast. You can just search that on any major podcast format. And that's where we have our book club meetings in podcast form. And it's pretty popular. People like to listen. We also have Mormonish podcast. If you guys want to tune into that, we interview, well, a lot of you guys. So because you guys are the most interesting people we know. So it's fun to get to know everybody through the podcast. There are some date changes for regular book club coming up because we have Easter during the regular book club time in April. So we have moved that to the 16th. So put that on your calendar. On May, in May, regular book club falls on Mother's Day. And that would just be too much to ask, right? To pull everybody away on Mother's Day. So we are moving that date to the 21st. These are all on Sunday, and just date changes due to trying to avoid those holidays. So we'll put more information out about that later. Very quickly, our next book, which we are going to talk about at the end with a more comprehensive review, is Recovering Agency by Luna Lindsay. And she, I believe, is going to be able to Zoom in with us. I am talking to Luna, and Luna is going to be able to join us. So we'll have more information about that. So I think that finally ends the announcements. Oh my gosh, they get longer every time. We are now going to start talking about our book, and our presenter today is the amazing Kevin. So Kevin, take it away.
All right, good morning. Yeah, this is it's an exciting book. It's a very long one, so we'll try to get through it. It's Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. He says in his book, there can be no question of which was the greatest era for culture. The answer has to be today, until it is superseded by tomorrow. And there's a picture of him. He looks just like someone you would picture from the Enlightenment era. So this is I can't go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this kind of sums up his book. Starts out with a quote. He says, "My country is led by people with a dark vision of the current moment, mothers and children trapped in poverty, an education system which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge, and the crime and the gangs that have stolen too many lives. We are in an outright war that is expanding and metastasizing. The blame for this nightmare may be placed on the global power structure that has eroded the underlying spiritual and moral foundations of Christianity. In this audiobook, I will show you that this bleak assessment of the world is wrong. And not just a little wrong, but wrong. Flat earth wrong, couldn't be more wrong." So that's a pretty bold statement that, flat earth wrong, that we do live in a great time. There's a quote here also that he gives at the beginning of the book by Barack Obama. It says, if you had to choose a moment in history to be born and you did not know ahead of time who you would be, you didn't know if you would be born into a wealthy or poor family, what country you'd be born in, whether you were going to be a man or woman, if you had to choose blindly what moment to be born, you'd choose now. So that's really cool. As you think about that, you just think of the things that we have today. Back, 100 years ago, they were praying for moisture so that they could farm, and now we pray for that so we can go skiing, right? So, it's just a great time to live. Okay, so as for the organization of his book, he divides his book into 3 parts. Part 1 kind of gives some introductory concepts. Part 2 has a lot of data, a lot of charts. He goes through and he describes with data why today is the best time to live. That opening statement. He does a really great job at presenting a very a good case for this. And then in part 3, he talks about reason, science, and humanism. Kind of gives a really good summary of why things are so good and where we should how we should proceed. So we'll go through this. I'm going to talk in 5 different sections. At the end of each section, that's what the colors are there for. It's about 4, 5, 6 chapters per section. Then we'll open up for questions, and you can make comments or questions. It is kind of a long book, so on some of those chapters, I might kind of go quickly over a few of them. I do have a slide per chapter. So chapter 1 is Dare to Understand. He talks about reason, science, humanism, and progress. And each of these, we will, toward the end, we'll talk about reason, science, and humanism. And part 2, through the middle, we'll be talking about the progress that we've been making. Reason is, we want to find objective standards. And that doesn't mean that we're perfectly rational agents, but we try to be. It means that we don't fall back on generators of delusion, which are faith, dogma, revelation, authority, charisma, mysticism, divination, visions, gut feelings, and sacred texts. So we want to get away from that we've relied on for so long. Science is a paradigm for achieving reliable knowledge. And humanism, he is a very, very big proponent for humanism. It's basically a secular foundation for morality. And one thing that it does is it privileges the well-being of individuals above the glory of the tribe, race, nation, and religion. That really resonates with me. I think that resonates with a lot of people, especially coming, from a religion that does place so much emphasis on, the glory of the religion. What motivated humanism was the hauntings of memories of centuries of religious carnage, like the Crusades, Inquisition, witch hunts, a lot of stuff like that. And humanism condemns secular cruelties such as slavery, despotism, execution for frivolous offenses, sadistic punishments, and that. Progress. So he talks about, and we'll go through the progress. But his claim is that if it's unguided by humanism, it's not progress. Sometimes it can be hard to tell if we're making progress or not. Knowing what direction we should travel can be difficult. And so his case is that humanism will propel us in the right direction. And he talks about, as far as progress goes, a farmer doesn't conjure stuff up in isolation, or a craftsman. They don't make stuff out of isolation. But what we do is we depend on a network of specialists. Each of us learn how to make something as efficiently as possible, and then we combine the fruits of our labors, and we're able to make great products. And if you just think of like a simple item like a pot that you cook with, just the amount of effort that would take for one person to make, they would have to provide their own travel to somewhere to mine materials. They would have to then have tools to heat that up, which they have made, and then be able to they'd have to make a screw in order to combine the handle to the pot. And so we live in a time where we're making a lot of progress, and it's not just one person that's doing this, but as humans, we're all working on this together. Okay, chapter 2 is entropy, evolution, and information. So he presents these three key ideas, and I think his purpose for presenting these is just so we can have a grasp of you know where we came from, why the universe is the way it is. So he talks about entropy. What entropy is a measure of disorderliness. If you've taken thermodynamics, I have not, but the second law is that entropy in a closed system always increases. If you have kids, you know this very well. You organize your playroom, and within hours, it goes from a state of orderliness into disorder, and it never goes the other way on its own. It always takes energy to be put into it to reorder it. This is just kind of a natural condition of our universe, is that things go from order to disorder. The example that he puts in his book is that sandcastles don't create themselves. If you build a sandcastle and you come back the next day, there's a good chance that it's going to be just completely mixed in with the rest of the sand and be completely disordered. Now one thing, I think he mentions it later in the book, but and I remember reading another book where it talked about entropy, and it almost makes you think, oh, this is a great case for theism. God must have created everything, and now we're just seeing everything unfold, and it's becoming more disordered. But the key here is that it's in a closed system. Things become more disordered. So evolution is another part that he talks in this chapter. And evolution is a huge topic, and he just touches it. If you want to learn about evolution, there's better books for it. But it really kind of defeats entropy through a self-replicating process. We evolve over millions of years. We have evolved. Genetic replication has propagated us from generation to the next, sometimes causing errors. And when those errors happen, usually they're not advantageous, but sometimes they are. And when they are, then that points to us being more successful at producing offspring, and those good mutations will be the ones that survive the longest. He talks about how we are adapted from the past, but that doesn't mean that we're necessarily adapted for the future. So where we are in the universe is a product of evolution in the past. So here we are in this place, and we're going to be going forward having adapted well to the past. Information, he talks about information, talks about how it's stored in our genes and in our brains, and how it connects us to the laws of nature. We are very complex beings. We have higher order thinking, we have goals and sub goals, and our progress over the centuries has allowed us to become very intelligent, even though there is so much more that there's a lot that we don't know. He talks about how energy capture has enabled more thinking and less surviving. So as we've been able to capture more energy, fighting against entropy, we now live in a time where we can think. We're not just trying to survive from day to day. The other part of information that he talks about is that ideas are not just abstracted in the mind of a single thinker, but we can pool our ideas across a community of thinkers. So here we are in a book club discussing a book that we've read, and we're able to combine all of our ideas and come up with something better than any one of us could on our own. Okay, chapter 3 talks about counter-enlightenments. The Enlightenment ideals are rooted in reason and human nature, so that any reasonable human can engage with them. He talks about how as soon as the Enlightenment came about, it was followed by a counter-enlightenment. No sooner did people step into the light that they decided the darkness wasn't so bad after all. We can kind of see that a lot of times that's in our nature to do that. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. So Pinker talks about religious faith. He says that religious faith is to believe without good reason, which isn't too far from what I would have called faith several years ago, which would be to believe in something unseen that I don't know. And Steven Pinker says that his case is that goes against enlightenment, that we don't want to do that. We want to believe for good reason. So religious faith has elevated some moral good above humans, enforcing rituals and taboos. and it values souls above lives. I have certainly seen that. That was kind of one of the things that hit me really hard upon leaving religion was that that I valued souls above lives, including my own. Another counter-enlightenment is that people are expendable cells of a superorganism, that the glory is in the well-being of the entity rather than people that make it up. Kind of a motto of nationalism is, sweet it is to die for your country. So that isn't a counter-enlightenment. I know that, oh man, watching Saving Private Ryan, that just hit me so hard. Just seeing that, just the way that people have been treated in the past and today, but as we're getting better, it's less, but just that people can be expendable. Very counter-enlightenment. His last one that he mentioned was left and right-wing ideologies have become secular religions. They've done this by having communities of correct beliefs, righteousness, and demonizing the other side. Okay, one more chapter and then we'll go into comments. So going into part 2 on progress. His first chapter is progressophobia, the fear of progress. So he talks about Pollyanna to Eeyore. Kind of our nature is that we think we're less likely than average to become victims of divorce, layoff, accident, illness, or crime. However, we think that society will become worse over time and that our country is headed in the wrong direction. I think most people would agree with that's how they feel. One reason for this is that news is about things that do happen, not things that don't happen. So we always see those bad headlines, but we never see the good headlines, or at least we see them a lot less. So we want to counter this, and he talks about how to soundly praise the state of the world. He says what we need to do is look at the data. We need to count this with respect to the number of people alive, not in absolute numbers. We need to look at how many people are sick, oppressed, starving, illiterate, and unhappy, based on how many people are there. We also need to be concerned with, are those numbers going up or are those numbers going down? So we'll talk a lot about in part 2. Crimes, war, hunger, that has all been trending down. As we go through these numbers, it's not linear, it's not monotonically trending down, but if we look at it on a long time scale, then we can see the trends, for the most part, are going down. He also points out that just because y is less than x does not mean that y equals 0. So, we still have problems. He's not going to be making a claim that we don't have any problems today. And another thing is, if anyone is a victim of any of these, when you're a victim of any of these things, you're not going to see that it's not. It's hard to see. You're going to see everything all over. Also, just because things are trending down doesn't mean we can sit back and let the problems clean themselves up, and it doesn't mean that the future will also trend downward. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Also, he points out that bad is stronger than good. If you take your day today and you say what good things could happen to me versus what bad things could happen, you're gonna find that the bad things are bottomless. Whereas the good things, you're somewhat limited. So that's kind of setting the stage for going in and talking about the data. Let's open it up for if anyone has any comments on those first 4 chapters. Let's see. Sorry, I got to get this bar back up. All right. Yeah, Jackie.
Just really quickly, I have a father who is 90 years old who was in the Korean War, and my father-in-law was in the Vietnam War. And, they were raised on this nationalism. And I mean, they went to war and fought, my father was lucky. He was like a clerk. And my father-in-law was a little behind the back lines. But, it's so hard because you read a book like this and you see how clearly they were indoctrinated, and all of us were, and there's something about freedom, but at the same time you have to respect so much that they went and did this and went to war. And I'm just thankful now for the statement when we can say I'm so thankful for your service. And I think that's what's hard. We're in such paradigm shift now. And once you see, you can't unsee. And finding the respect and the dialogue is, I think, our biggest challenge, and also our greatest hope.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Landon.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book in that it was so positive and that it gave us hope for the future. And, because it seems like you always hear it's the last days, the end of the earth's coming, everything's falling apart. And when you read this, you realize, no, it's really not. It's really pretty good. Although I do think we kind of have been swept into a swell of, well, that can't happen to us. It's almost like as Americans, it's gotten so good that you believe, oh, there can't be an economic crash that's going to, like the Depression again, or, oh, my kids aren't ever going to have to go to war and die. I think sometimes we get settled into this, oh, this is never going to happen to me, because it hasn't happened for so many years. So I think his point's well taken in that sense. But I was reading the book actually when I was, I read a lot of it on the airplane. I went to Korea this month, and coming back, I was sitting in the plane, and your neck hurts and you're going, oh, I'm sitting up trying to sleep. How horrible is this? And then you realize that, as I read the book, I'm like, what am I complaining about? In 13 hours, I'm going to be halfway around the world. They're feeding me dinner. They're bringing me drinks. I'm watching videos, reading my book on a thing. How good do I have it compared to everybody before me? So I really thought the book brought out the positive side, and I really enjoyed that part of the book.
Yes, you got to sing Pioneer Children Sing as they walked and walked and walked when you're on that airplane. Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, as you were talking about things, it just popped into my head Holland's statement on where will you go if you leave the church? Like the world outside the bubble of Mormonism is full of peril, and where will you go without us? It just, we're like, there's a lot of good places to go, and that's just the thought that I had.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else, or should we move on? All right. We will move on. Okay. So now we're starting to get into the data. There's like 17 chapters of this. So all right. So his first one is life. Our global average life expectancy is 71 years, 71.4 years in 2015. And he points out that is dragged down by infant mortality, which we have to consider. If you have 8 people, one of them died in a car accident when they were 5, in order to obtain 70 years, that means that the other 79 people had to live till they were about 80 in order for that to average out. So 71 and a half years is average, but again, that's dragged down. Contrast that with earlier people, hunter-gatherers, 32.5 years. The Bronze Age, also the low 30s. So, yeah, I don't think many of us would be here, if any. So life expectancies have picked up in the 20th century, and it shows no signs of slowing down. Something that is really cool is that every year that we live, through the 20th century, every year that someone lived, their life expectancy only went down by 7 months. Because life expectancy went up, the number of years they had left only decreased by 7 months. I thought that was very cool. If we look at the charts, the one on the left shows life expectancy. This is for the entire world, and then also several regions. It is trending upwards. There is a dip, kind of reminding us that it's not an escalator. It's not always going up. But AIDS in Africa caused that dip there on the chart on the left. But again, it picked up and started continuing upward again, to the point where, life expectancy is very high throughout the world. The chart on the right kind of showed what I was talking about with the 7 months for every year that we live. Kind of a chart similar to what an actuary would look at. But just over the years, it just shows that life expectancy went up for all, for all age ranges. Very very cool chart. Okay, child mortality is another thing that it has plummeted 100-fold. That is like, when you think about it, and I can't remember what he's, it's in the chart. Since, about like mid 1700s, that chart in the middle is the child mortality. So you can just see for the data that we have, just how that has dropped down to almost nothing. 30% of babies or children died before age 5. That's unthinkable now. It is unthinkable. And one thing that he pointed out is it has a snowball effect. Because child mortality was so high, people had a lot of children kind of as an insurance policy. You don't have to have that anymore. It's, you can expect, you hope that, there's with fewer deaths that that we will survive longer and won't need as many children, right? So it's kind of a snowball effect there. Mother death in childbirth was 1% until recently, and now it is 0.02%. So again, almost nothing. And the progress in child mortality helps, but it doesn't fully account for the progress in life expectancy. Our number of healthy years is up, dementia's down, and so not only are we living longer, but we're living higher quality lives. Okay, chapter 6 is on health. The deadly diseases of the past: yellow fever, cholera, polio, smallpox, AIDS, and measles. We don't get these, like, these are not, we don't die of these anymore. That's kind of a miracle. The solutions to this, like, I was just, as he pointed these out, it was bizarre to me. Boiling, vaccines, hand washing, sterilization, and not drinking downstream. That's kind of the big thing that has improved our health. It's things that are obvious to us today, yet it hasn't always been so obvious. So it's very, very cool that health has been, we've eradicated diseases. He listed, there's this huge list of advances in science and health and medicine. He claims have saved 5 billion lives. Discovery of blood groups was 1 billion lives. Chlorination of water, 177 million. Smallpox eradications, 131 million. And the list just continues on and on, to 5 billion lives that have been saved by health, science advances in health. Chapter 7, he talks about sustenance. Something we don't appreciate today is that famine has plagued us throughout our history. We really are the first society that has the problem of too many calories, and that is a good problem to have, and indicates that that the developed world is improving. The chart on the top just kind of shows that. It starts in the 1700s, just how many calories each person got per day, and that number is increasing for all the countries that he's listed and worldwide. That's on a pretty good increase. Kind of way that just shows that we are fighting hunger. Stunting due to undernourishment is decreasing. It's 13% compared to 35. Again, not zero, but it's in the right direction. He talked about irrigation and genetic selection. Those were improvements to help us with, fighting famine. Those were good, but they weren't enough. Some of the advances recently that have helped have been crop rotation, fossil fuels, storage, nitrogen fertilizers. Those have helped increase the food per acre. Now, his claim is that it's attributed to 2.7 billion lives saved from starvation. That is a large number. Less than a third of the land is needed than before we had fertilizers and these things, and that's leading to forests bouncing back. So here we are. We have some data to that's showing that things are getting better. A number he put up is that 70 million people died of famine in the 20th century. 80% of these were due to communist regimes, forced collectivization, punitive confiscation, and totalitarian central planning. The chart on the bottom shows that. It's kind of a low resolution chart, but it just shows how many famine deaths per 100,000 people per decade. So you can see that it's quite high, and then has moved down to almost nothing in the last few decades. Okay, chapter 8 is on wealth. He gave a history of the sustained prosperity in gross world product. Claimed that there was almost no gain to GWP up to 1000 AD. Took 500 years to double that, and then in the 19th century it exploded. Since 1820, it tripled in 1900, tripled again in 1950, tripled again in 1975, and then tripled again in 2003. So just what we've been able to produce has dramatically increased. He also pointed out, which was very fascinating, that the GWP grossly underestimates the expansion of our prosperity. An example of this is how much would a cancer treatment cost in 1800? And the answer to that is that, well, it didn't exist. You couldn't have had that. You could have paid all the money in the world and it couldn't have bought that. Refrigeration is another simple example that we all have in our homes. Well, how much would that have costed in 1800? Again, all the money in the world could not have bought that. So even though these numbers say that, yes, we've exploded, it doesn't do it justice. So as I was doing these slides, I was reminded of a podcast that Planet Money did, and then Steven Pinker later mentioned it in the book, the same study. But it was an episode on how much light one day of labor would buy. So it's a simple study. In ancient Babylon, one day of labor would buy you 10 minutes of light. In 1850, not too long ago, they had kerosene, and that got you 5 hours of light. And then in 1990, with light bulbs, it gives you 20,000 hours of light. So huge advance that we don't even think about day to day. And again, with that earlier statement about it grossly underestimates it, we're talking about a candle versus a light switch. And sometimes not even light switch. You walk into a room and it lights up for you. So just the advances in what we have and the way that we live are just huge. Things that have enabled this have been open economies with laws to protect, anonymous transactions, and then a change in values. Supposedly, commerce wasn't viewed as a reputable industry. I don't know. They were viewed as lowly people doing commerce, but the change in values helped that. Let's see. We are eradicating poverty. It's not nothing, but we are eradicating it, and the world is becoming middle class. These charts, both of these charts are on poverty. You've got in 1820, 90% of the world was living in extreme poverty. That has gone down. Today, we're at about 10% that live in extreme poverty. So while we still can make improvements, that is huge. The chart on the bottom, I think, paints the picture a little bit better because it kind of shows it's not just a percentage, it actually shows you the numbers. What you have is you can see the number of people not living in extreme poverty and then the number of people that are living in extreme poverty. You can see that number since the 70s has been steadily decreasing quite a bit. And the number of people not living in poverty is just going up quite linearly. So that's a yeah, very cool. He points out that solving this problem will require more than just extrapolating with a ruler, that we need to move the goalpost and attack poverty, just not extreme poverty. And then he also points out that some of the enablers of this have been a decline in corrupt communist regimes, government focus on education and the well-being of citizens, industrialization, trade, and technology. Chapter 9 is on equality. So, we just saw that we are getting wealthier, but the question is this all going to the rich? The left likes to blame Wall Street, and the right likes to blame immigration and foreign trade. What we do have is a measure. There's an economic inequality measure called the Gini index. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But there's a chart on it. 0 means that everyone is equal. 1 means that somebody owns everything. So it's all owned by one person. So on this chart, you can see that in 1820, that number was pretty low, meaning that everyone was pretty equal in what they in as far as the distribution of wealth across everybody. The Gini index raised quite steadily until about the 50s, 60s, somewhere in there, and tapered off, and is looks like it's on a downtrend on a short time scale, on a very recent time scale. So that's kind of where the inequality sits as far as the data shows. Pinker does point out that inequality does not, well, people feel that inequality means modernity has failed to improve the human condition, but he points out some things here. He says, recognize that it's not a fundamental well-being. Also, don't wish that Boris's goat will die. There's a Russian fable about this poor farmer who lives by another farmer who has more goats than him. He comes across a magic lamp, rubs it, and he wishes that Boris's goat would die so that they can be more equal. So we don't want to play that game. Wealth is not he points out that wealth is not a zero-sum game, and that people move to higher incomes over their career. So even though there may be inequality, sometimes we can forget that over a career, people will earn more as they advance in their career. He also points out that we shouldn't conflate inequality with unfairness. And then the last part of this chapter is he talks about, he brings up a good point, that the redistribution of wealth through social spending is compatible with capitalism. And that's, this chart on the bottom, these OECD countries there's 35 countries, democratic states with market economies. They all have social spending programs, and that we can see that these are increasing over, as time goes on, that the trend is that those have been increasing. He just points out this is compatible with capitalism. Okay, do we have any comments or questions on those chapters? Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, I just got, as things are getting better, remember that in the Mormon culture, Joseph Smith came with the revelation of the word of wisdom: no alcohol, no coffee or tea. At that time, doctors were, working on cadavers and then delivering babies or going into surgery without washing their hands. It wasn't until the late 1800s that the concept of washing your hands before surgery or before delivering a baby or anything, it just hits me that it would have been real nice if God would have thought to tell Joseph Smith, everybody should wash your hands, as being a more helpful word of wisdom to improve everyone's life. That was just my thought.
Yes, that would have been convenient. Thank you. Jackie.
For me, I really like all this data because it really grounds you in what really is going on. And I was listening to a podcast by Rich Roll a year or two back, And they were talking about the problem with today and the right hating the left and all these extremes. And he says, we have an intersection on both sides of holier than thou with ignorance. And that line has just always stayed with me. And I love that he is pushing that capitalism really is a good thing. And it's the only system that's worked so far. It doesn't mean it doesn't have its flaws. But he points out what's working and he proves it with data. And I think it really grounds us and takes us out of this fear-mongering, righteous indignation, all this stuff that is emotional, and puts us in a space of real common sense and able to see the big picture view. So I'm really, really appreciate this parts that we're in with the book.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and it's really good. Like the data that he shows it's really helpful. And I think he does a good job at pointing out both like both sides of the aisle. He does a great job at just presenting it as it is, I think. All right, Landon.
Yeah, I just thought these numbers were incredible when you look at what the previous 20,000, 50,000, 70,000 years of human existence, and to see today most of those numbers really came down in the last in our lifetime. We've really seen the change happen in our lifetime, and it was as I looked at those graphs, I was just going, oh my gosh, this is just incredible. Why do people though think that the world's falling apart? And I think as I thought about it, I thought, worldwide, these things are changing huge. Africa, South America, they're all trending so much, which has really made the average go up. But I think people look at their own life and they look local to things. And so I think that's why we see so many of these, I can't drive through Salt Lake and see the homeless people all over the place and go, what is going on? What is happening here? Even though I know the wealth worldwide is going up and countries in Africa are coming out of poverty, it looks like in my neighborhood that things are going downhill because I'm seeing the homelessness, I'm seeing the inequality in pay, I'm seeing these things. And so I think in a wealthy country where we were already up high, we don't see the bigger changes, or we see a tick down, and it makes us think, oh, things are going worse. And we look at it locally like that, whereas globally it's changing. But it does make you think, wow, what can I do locally to try to change things or make them better? Because I'm definitely seeing a downtrend when I drive through Salt Lake and see the homelessness and the poverty, and in people's jobs. I clearly can see inequality happening, where some people have everything and others are. Right now, my kids cannot buy a house. They have children, they're saving, they both have jobs, and they cannot buy a house. And so those things impact these numbers to you. And the chart can say one thing, but your own personal experience, I think, makes you see things one way or the other. So that was just an observation that I made.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Rebecca.
Yeah, I liked what Bruce said. I've always said I would believe in God if the first line in Genesis was, thou shalt boil thy water. I would have totally believed, right? That was thousands of years ago. So this whole book made me think of the concept of, and this may be simplistic as I'm thinking about it, but just the idea that religion tends to sometimes create a problem that only they have the answer for. And the problem here is that everything is horrible and the world is going to hell. And I don't think I ever, and again, I said this is a simplistic way maybe to look at it, but I don't think I ever realized that attending church decade after decade, you sort of have that concept from the pulpit. We're in the worst times. It's horrible. The only safety is here. And since having stepped away and still having family, friends that are still hearing this very subtly, it's subtle, but it's there. We're in a war. We have to fight. We have to this. I've noticed a definite shift in just my attitude and their attitude in just talking about them. I tend to think more, along the lines of what the stats in the books are showing. Maybe things really are okay. And there's sort of more of a gloom and doom attitude a little bit on the other side. Gloom and doom and then attitude, but aren't we lucky that we're safe? We're in this religion that's protecting us. So I don't know if anyone else has noticed that. And again, that's very simplistic, but just sort of an undercurrent of that idea that there's safety here. You've left. Oh, poor you. How horrible. How can you stand it? And I'm thinking, I actually feel happy. I actually am looking at things in a much more positive way and seeing positive achievements and things that are mentioned in the book. So I don't know. I appreciate all the stats. Maybe now I have some statistics to arm myself to argue, or maybe not argue, but just discuss with friends and relatives who keep trying to tell me we're in the very end days, end of times. The apocalypse is nigh. So that was just my thought.
Yes, all those atheists, such a problem, aren't they? Thank you.
Damn us.
Right. Bruce, did you have another comment?
Yeah. Basically, and I've mentioned this before, the book club helps me figure out how the world actually works, because we were given a narrative of, the pre-existence, the mortal probation, the afterlife, what we have to do. And, learning more, the Mormon narrative doesn't seem to work. And so leaving the church, being part of the book club, being part of other things, I'm trying to figure out how the world works. And then I'm also trying to figure out, what my place is in the world. And I really enjoyed listening to this book. And I just thought like a decade or more ago, I gave up cable TV because I just hate watching the news on cable TV. I read the newspapers and a few things like on YouTube, but it's very negative. And I just find for my own mental health, if I pay less attention to the constant drumbeat of the negative stuff going on. And then, when I think back on that, my previous comment of, if you leave the church, where will you go? Well, the apocalyptic religions, us, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Seventh-day Adventists, the world's coming to an end. So you have to do what we say right now and give us your money. It's all a control thing. And I think we have a much better perspective from the viewpoint of what's written here in the book, that things are getting better. As Landon pointed out, there is a homelessness problem, and we need to work locally with that. And those are things that we might be able to help with. So yeah, it just helps me. This book helped me have a better perspective on how the world works and what my place is in it, and where I need to help needs to be locally, and how I vote and stuff like that. So those are just my thoughts.
Cool, thank you. All right. Okay, so move on to environment. So not all the trends for the environment are positive, but he presents an alternative view to the radical view. The environment deals with microscopic level, such as chemicals that harm us and other species, and the macroscopic level, such as pollutants to the planet. He points out that some degree of pollution is inescapable, that when we use energy, it increases entropy elsewhere in the environment. He talked a lot about, and I found this part really fascinating, that when native people first set foot in an ecosystem, they typically hunted to extinction and burned large swaths of forest. They were not very good per capita to the environment. He also pointed out that farming is far from natural and causes even more problems. And then he points out that industrialization has been good for humanity. It's increased our lifespans, it's slashed poverty, and it's helped end slavery and many other things. And so as we talk about the environment, we need to offset, we need to offset the good against, the offsets to the environment need to be weighed against the benefit of the good that things have caused. He also points out that it's hard to worry about the pollution when you're hungry. So it's kind of one of those problems, kind of we mentioned earlier, once we can take care of our survival, now we can start to worry about things like the environment. He talks about there's been a lot of naive faith in stasis that has led to doomsday predictions that never happen. People have been afraid of a population bomb, and they've been afraid of running out of resources. And while this could happen, it hasn't happened yet, even though it's been predicted to have happened long, long ago. Another topic he talked about was dematerialization. This is fascinating. When you think about a smartphone, and this is a technology, and we might pollute while we're using this, but look at what it has reduced. It's reduced the amount of paper we use. It has a calculator in it, has a camera, a notebook, maps, flashlights, telephone, an alarm clock, and the list goes on. And that's just one device that, through our advances, has helped the environment. I think that's a fair statement. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but the point is that one thing has reduced a lot of other stuff. So with our advances in technology, he does have a chart that I found interesting. The chart on the top shows the amount of oil that we shipped by sea in the gray line, and the amount of oil spills in the sea in the dark line. What you can see is that in 1970, it appears that that's about when when oil shipped by sea started increasing. There were lots of spills, and those two lines are just kind of, they have an anti-trend in them. We're spilling a lot less, even though we're shipping a lot more oil by sea. And so through our advances, we are bettering our processes. And this is one industry, but it just shows that we do have better processes now than when the technology started. And one more, greenhouse gases. This is one that he points out that he is quite concerned about. The chart on the right shows our CO2 emissions. If you look at that trend is that we are polluting more and more. That trend is not going well. He makes a statement. He says, even if we cut greenhouse gases to 0 by 2075, we're still going to have a problem. And so he says that solutions are needed, and the time is now. Solutions he talked about were carbon pricing, nuclear. He talked about fusion as a future technology that might could save us. And then he also brought up a really good point about climate engineering. Who gets to control the thermostat? So if you've seen the show Daddy's Home, there's that funny scene where they're all bickering about the thermostat. And as much drama as that's going to cause over a household, think of how much more that would cause over nations who get to control the thermostat. Laura, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna, not a question specifically, kind of just more of a comment. I just think it's interesting, depending on like kind of the angle that you're looking at it with. And if we're looking at it like, we are heading in the right direction, we're progressing. I just like to think, even just on a personal level, progression is not always a perfectly straight line, like perfect, or it doesn't come in a perfect modality, right? There's going to be road bumps or mistakes or setbacks along the way. So if we can look at it like, okay, we are really solving a lot of problems with this maybe new technology or new way of doing things, and that is progress. Okay, but it has this collateral damage that comes along with it, maybe to the environment or whatnot. And then it's like the next step is, how do we remedy that part of it, right? And then it's just a continual process, and just hopefully, I guess the hope is that humanity can keep up remedying those things that come along with it, and in a rapid enough place that we're not destroying the earth in the meantime, right? But also like giving ourselves some grace that is just what part of progress looks like, that it is an ongoing mistake laden process of getting to where we eventually need to get to solve the problems that we're dealing with. So that was just my thought.
Yeah. Yep. And it goes way past even like the cell phones. Like look at all the, that might help with cutting down paper, but has all sorts of other implications, other things. Landon.
Yeah, I agree with Laura completely. And when you say who gets to control the thermostat, I do, and I say that because my career is I work for Johnson Controls. We do control systems for all major buildings all over the world, and I can tell you that this is what I do every day. Is we sit and we look at programming, how we can make a building. I mean, the technology now we're looking at, we look at how much carbon dioxide's in a room, how much so we can keep the limited amount of how much outside air we have to reheat. And the amount of energy and stuff you can save with technology is just incredible. And I think this has been bypassed a lot in this discussion of how much technology really can help you help the environment. And, we're kind of scared of things at times. Oh, it's going to go this way, but we discount what technology can do. I did think he got I thought he was a little optimistic in some of the things he said, such as nuclear. I agree with him that nuclear is completely the cleanest way to go. And yet the world's going completely the opposite. No one's building nuclear plants anymore. They're all shutting them down. And that's kind of sad because we've got some wrong ideas there that, we can't do it safely when we can. So I think there's these fear-based things. Of course, we all know, and Laura just said it. Every solution causes another problem that then has to be solved, that then causes another problem. But that's the way of the world. But it gets better over time. That's what these graphs keep showing. Over time, we're doing better. So we've got to let the technology go. We've got to let it progress. We've got to let there be some downside so that we can come to the upside. And that's just one of the things I've learned as I work every day in this industry is, it gets better over time, but you are going to make some mistakes along the way.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. All right. So peace. War has been our natural state. It's been romanticized. Got a picture of Captain Moroni there. I mean, it looks pretty cool, pretty tough. And that's the way the world has been. You go back long enough, the data here on the top chart shows the percentage of years in which the great powers of the world fought each other. That's pretty much 100% back from 1500 to 1700, or at least 80. Very high. Just we spend a lot of time in war. That's the history that we have. Looks like it started declining quite a bit in 1800, had some ups and downs. It's a really low resolution chart, but you get down to the most recent years and it's quite a bit down. We'll have bumps, we'll have more bumps, but it looks a lot better than it used to be. Not only was it it was decreasing in three things. It was duration, frequency, and intensity. So just in all of those areas, war is a lot less part of our lives now. After let's see. Oh, let's look at the bottom chart. This shows a little bit more recently, 1945 till 2015. This is a little bit more resolution. I think it's a bit more accurate. This one shows battle deaths per 100,000 people per year. You've got that huge bump in World War II. You see some bumps over some of the other wars. And then since about 1990, it's significantly down from where it had been previously. And then this data in here is kind of showing where this big bump is. I mean, it kind of overlaps maybe the tail end of it. So you can see that the data shows there's fewer deaths from war. If we remember Kant from a few talking about morality, a few book club months ago, Kant wrote an essay, Perpetual Peace. After World War II, ideas were systematically put into place to kind of help us keep out of war. Trading partners are less likely to go to war. So as we've increased global trade, that's been a good thing. Democratic government replacing glory-drunk leaders who drag their countries into war has helped. And then international laws and norms have helped that. Jackie, did you have a comment?
Yes. So I'm always thinking about, after I read the book several years ago, The Black Swan, that, something can always come in and blow every trend to HELL. And I'm thinking about Putin right now. And, is he just going to be a downturn in this tick? Because, these numbers never go up perfectly. We get the downturns. Is Putin going to just be a downturn, or is he going to, create a World War II again? Because, he's his own entity, and where they are geographically, it's a scary thing.
Yes.
So
yes.
anybody's
Thank
thoughts
you.
on that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll have to read that book. Oops, just skipped too many. Okay. Talking about safety. Crimes are trending down. The chart on the upper left, we have homicide deaths. England looks pretty flat. We've got data from the United States. It went up in the 70s, stayed there 90s, and then has started trending down. Data for the world has been trending down. There's not a huge timeline on that. But something that Landon said earlier, I think he brought up in this book. I think it's kind of cool. Why don't I see the crime? It's kind of clustered, and he says it's clustered within a few countries, within those countries, a few cities, within those few cities, a few neighborhoods, and within those few neighborhoods, a few blocks. So we don't see a lot of crime. It kind of gets clustered, and that kind of drives a lot of the data with things like homicide, homelessness. See, I don't see a lot of it, but we have some of it in Logan. I think it's probably more in Salt Lake. It kind of clusters in certain areas, and so someone may not see it, and someone may see a lot of it, depending on where they're at. It does get clustered. Motor safety. Chart on the top right shows a pretty strong trend downward since cars were invented. He also pointed out that cars actually prevented a lot of horse accidents. He talked about pedestrian accidents going way down. But this is due to features in vehicles. Most of them, he's talking about Ford implementing all sorts of things that were for safety, and it was a sales flop because they had actually led the regulations. The regulations weren't there forcing them to do it, but they were trying to make it safer for people. Collapsible steering columns. I think he says so that they don't turn us into kebabs when we get in head-on collisions. Features on the highway such as reflector poles. We've made those improvements, and then with laws such as drunk driving laws, we've made improvements there. So motor safety has been trending down. Something this chart, it talks about deaths per 100 million vehicle miles. We drive more, so I don't know. If you did it in per person, that chart might be a little bit more accurate, but we do, I guess, per miles, that is trending down. Occupational safety is constantly improving. We've automated dangerous jobs, adding guardrails, training, valuing our workers more than the shingles, more than the items that they're installing. That has all helped. But this, that's gone down significantly since 1910. This is with our lifetimes, things have gotten a lot safer. My dad worked at a cement plant, and the death toll was not zero there. And accidents, they had a last accident and no accidents in so many days. And if they hit a year, that was like a huge milestone. They got a huge bonus. So even now, we still do have some of that, but it's significantly better. Death by accident. He's got his chart on the bottom right. Falls are down, fire, drowning, everything is down with one exception, which is poison, death by poison, gas or vapor. Gas or vapor is down, solid or liquid is up. And a big part of that is due to overdosing on drugs. So other accidents down, but that one is up. Chapter 13 is on terrorism. He points out that we live in the safest time in history. In 2016, the majority of Americans named terrorism as the most important issue facing the US, which means that a fair amount of us were probably thinking that, and may still think that. But his claim is that terrorism is a distraction to progress. If you look at the chart on the right, the death tolls pale in comparison to other deaths. Compared to those other charts we've been looking at, death due to terrorism is per 100,000 people, around 0.1, 0.2. So it's like 1 in a million, 1 in half a million. And this terrorism includes, like you see the spike 2011, that was a big spike, but also includes things like school shootings. So terrorism creates an oversized outcry and fear. It gets a lot of news media coverage. And, part of this is that our fear from malevolent intent versus accident is quite a bit higher. It's a lot harder it doesn't feel good if someone dies from malevolent intent versus an accident. Both are bad, but the one feels a lot worse. We also have zero tolerance of political violence. Political violence causes fear of anarchy and that the social order is about to collapse. So those are all founded, and those are all good reasons to be afraid of it. But if you look at the numbers, we shouldn't be as afraid of that as we are other accidents, other ways that we die. And then part of that too is that terrorists don't seek damage; they seek theater. Okay, chapter 14 talked about democracy. He states that tribal people fall into raiding and looting. So we've set up governments, and these early governments, they pacified the people that they ruled, but they also imposed a reign of terror, including slavery, human sacrifice, torture of the disobedient. And that even though they were tyrannical, the alternative of chaos was worse, it was more deadly. And what democracy does is it attempts to avoid the tyranny and the chaos, tries to find that middle ground where we can have the best society possible. So, as we go forward and make progress, democracy is viewed as a good thing. And he's got a couple of charts that kind of measure that. The top one is death penalty abolitions, the number of countries that have abolished capital punishment. In 1980, that went way up. And then the one on the bottom is the number of executions in the US from almost the 1800s till 2016. And that one has been coming down, even though we're not in those countries that have abolished the death penalty. One thing he talked about is, there's a lot of countries, they might have democratic republic of something in its name, and he says those are the ones that they're anything but a democracy. Those people won't even know what the word democracy means. They'll give you a different definition. And so just because it says democracy does not mean that it is. Something that he talked about within a democracy is, we sometimes feel like our voting doesn't matter very much. But he pointed out that the ability to complain is a big feature of a democracy, that complaining without being thrown in jail for complaining against the government, that's what really kind of can set us off or set us apart. An example of this was women's suffrage. They did not have the right to vote. Yet the ability to complain was able to bring that about. Okay, equal rights. He kind of started off saying, don't lose sight of how far we've come. We're not there yet, but we have come a long ways. It was not that long ago that we had a very racist, sexist, and homophobic society. And he says that's declining with time and with each generation, that the trend is improving. And I hope we can see. I hope that's everybody's experience. It does seem down. The chart at the top, there's three different categories that he's showing since 1990 till today, so it's not a large time scale. It's the percentage of people that agree with that statement that is there of women should return to their traditional roles in society. School boards ought to have the right to fire teachers who are known homosexuals, and then I think it's all right for blacks and whites to date each other. Sorry, and those that disagree with that last one. So we would hope that would go down. The trend is going down. It looks slow to me, but I guess it's the right direction. It feels high, but anyway, that's his data. So trends of hate crimes and rape are down. Women make up 47% of the labor force. Things do look like they are improving. And something that gives you faith that this will improve is that we're replacing dogma. Well, replacing dogmas with reason requires justification for the mistreatment of people, and it crumbles under scrutiny. So when someone has a dumb idea, it's going to crumble under scrutiny. And so have faith that this will continue to improve. The progress is global, and people are starting to prioritize autonomy over authority. And we see this in newer as generations, as these new generations start coming up, they're much more autonomous over authority. They're becoming more liberal in every part of the world, and so equal rights should hopefully improve in the long term. He also points out that childhoods are improving. There's a decline in child labor, corporal punishment, early death, and we have an improvement in play and education. Okay, we're on to comments. Jackie, do you have a comment?
Yes. I think it's uncanny how those last two chapters, you can parallel it exactly with the church. Dogma, 40% of women are working. They're against women working. They don't want anybody to have a vote. It's complete hierarchy. I just think it's uncanny. And my husband and I were talking, and I thought my husband really nailed it. He said the church is stuck in 1950, and they're digging in their heels and doing everything possible to stay there. And, we just know what you said with the opposite of entropy, like everything moves forward. And people like us who see through all of this say, you know what, this church, it's not for me now, or it's going to have to change. And I just found it uncanny how the church shows up in the negative with everything this book puts out.
Yes, that is uncanny. Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, I just have, I guess, a quick plug. Chapter 14 and 15. These are some of the themes that are going to come up in my presentation of the book, Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. The tribal people, raiding and looting and stuff. That was one of the things that one of his changes that allowed him to conquer much of the world. So it's a very good book. It's not, it's history, but when I look at things, trying to figure out how the world works, our narrative of in America, in the US, and with being Mormon, gave a narrative of how the world works. Genghis Khan and looking what was going on in Asia gives us a different view. And so those topics are going to come up in our discussion in May.
Oh, cool. That sounds very fascinating. Thank you. Landon.
I just wanted to comment on what Jackie had to say, because she talked about the church paralleling these things. And the church doesn't want us to know these statistics. They don't want you to know that the world's getting better, because the world's not getting better because of them. It's getting better in spite of them. You look, religion was the main government, whatever you want to say. Religion is what drove most people's lives up until just the last couple centuries. And you see that the last couple centuries, as the world gets less religious, the increases are substantially going up as religion is going down. Is that coincidental or not? I don't think it is. I mean, you look at the money the church has, they could eradicate a lot of these problems with that money they have, yet they're not using it for any of that. They're not using it to solve the problems. Why? Because the problems is what they're there for. If the problems go away, they don't need to be there anymore. So it's almost like it's contradictory for church and humanism to coexist in the same space. It seems like, as I read through this.
Yeah. Yep. And he hits on that in that end part. I do like that. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, that's true, Landon. To speak to your comment, show me one advance in the history of the world that hasn't been fought tooth and nail by religion, or the person that came up with the advance put to death. It happens a lot. But my comment, I was thinking about what you said, Kevin, about in a democracy, people can, voice their opinion, they can make change, they can fight for things, and that's what has led to a lot of these advances. And I think that's why, as a lot of us are post-Mormons or nuanced Mormons, within the church, there's not a lot of, it's not a democracy, it's a theocracy. There's not a lot of avenue for anybody to really say anything or make a change. Mormons who are post-Mormons, but still concerned about Mormonism, on the outside are the ones that can raise those voices. They can point out things, they can evoke the change, I feel. So it's important. It's an important part of being a Mormon. You're still a Mormon, even though you're a post-Mormon. And when you shine a spotlight on these things, changes happen. There are lots of examples that we could point to where nobody inside could say anything, but enough outcry on the outside, and some of these changes within the religion are made. So that was just my observation.
Yeah, it's so true. Too bad it can't happen from within, but yeah, I thought that was really fascinating when you talked about the democracy and how that's, being able to complain is what makes it great. Too bad they can't from the inside. Joe.
Yeah, as I was reading through the book, I was surprised. So about 5 or 7 years ago, it seems like there was a BYU talk that we were listening to. And this guy came out and he said, and I can't remember the name or anything, and I wish I could find it because my search abilities are terrible. Anyway, he was talking about how we are living in the greatest time. We are doing okay, which was really kind of weird because I'd never heard that from church sources. And it reinforced in me yeah, I've always felt this. I felt like all the rhetoric around the end times and everything was kind of not, it just never sat well with me. And then to have this guy come out and say, yeah, we're living great. And then to have this book come out and show data, yeah, we're doing great. I was talking to some guy on Twitter the other day about how Holland was talking about all the terrible things and the world's coming to an end. And I'm like, yeah, but does he have any data? Because this book has plenty of data that shows that's not true, And again, my big thing with religion or God is, why didn't God teach anyone to wash their hands? Why didn't Jesus just teach them to use water, correctly? And anyway, so it's been a really impressive book. It's got a lot of stats and figures in it, and I'm enjoying this discussion. But yeah, it's just weird that one talk out of the blue at BYU was like, hey, yeah, and I've never heard from him again, so maybe he got fired. I don't know, but
Yeah, thank you. Ron.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed as I've left the church is that the church controls its members through fear a great amount. So the whole second coming, anything imminent is about to happen. So we have to all gather up and build Zion and travel to Utah. We're all sacrificing our lives trying to get to Utah. It was all over fear of the second coming anytime. And so this fear-based outlook of the world is ingrained into the religion. And leaving the religion, I can see that fear is just really unhealthy. But some of the beliefs are just downright dangerous because they believe that God is in control of the world. And if the world gets really screwed up, say global warming happens and people are dying everywhere and utter catastrophe, that just means that Jesus's return is so much closer. So this is all part of God's plan, and He's going to take care of us. So we don't have to worry about the environment or these other things, because if things go to hell, then that's just because it's part of God's plan. And so one thing I realized when I left the church is like, crowd, we're in charge of taking care of this planet and making sure it's safe for our next generation. We need to take care of it and do what we can to make sure that it carries on, because there's nobody out there looking after the world. It's us.
Yep, big responsibility. Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, going back to my comment on the word of wisdom and, washing hands, but, wine, beer, tea and coffee required you to boil the water. Wine and beer fermented and created alcohol. I think all of those were ways that mankind developed having safer drinking water. And then there's I think it's an old wives' tale that, in Jesus's time, it was grape juice and not alcohol. But my understanding is if you squeeze the juice out of grapes, it will naturally start to ferment. Like if you have flour and you let it sit, it starts turning into sourdough because of the yeast in the air and stuff. So Mormons tried to have you can't drink alcohol. Jesus made grape juice. Well, I think grape juice is only possible after pasteurization came around, because any juice of the grape would ferment into wine. It's just an interesting thing how our culture has told us so many things. The world is better and was better because people boiled water to make tea, boiled water to make coffee. And those were just kind of how mankind developed safer drinking water. So kind of an interesting thing when you compare it to the word of wisdom.
Yeah. Although Jesus just said it and it turned to wine. It went from water to wine. No fermentation necessary. Yes, thank you. All right. So this is our last section on part 2. I might hit some of these chapters fairly quickly, just due to time, because I do want to hit that last section. If anyone has comments though on them, if there's something in here that you found really interesting, I skip over it, you make that comment. Knowledge, we're becoming more literate. This chart shows that in 1500s, no one was literate. And now, well, actually the world in 1825 was 10% literate. That's bizarre. And within 175 years, year 2000, we're now 80+% literate. So big progress worldwide and across all countries. And I don't see that trend going anywhere, without a major problem. IQs have even been rising. He says 3 points per decade. And it's in abstract thinking. It's not necessarily what they're teaching in school, but we are learning how to think. He talks about how important education is, how when governments invest in education, we get better people. It can dispel bad beliefs, such as leaders rule with the divine right, and that people that don't look like you are less than human. It also helps us recognize that other cultures are valid like our own. Charismatic saviors have led their countries to disaster. Our convictions, no matter how strong, can be wrong. It teaches us that there's better or worse ways to live, and that other cultures may know things that we don't, and that there's ways to resolve issues without violence. Quality of life. This one's very fascinating. Work hours are decreasing, retirement is earlier, and vacation time is up. Top 2 charts show that we moved in, before the 1900, well, about around 1900, we were 60 hours of work per week. That's now decreased to a little bit more than 40. It gives us a better quality of life, working fewer hours. Retirement has gone from 75-ish. the percentage of men 65 and older working in the workforce has gone from 75% down to 20%. So the amount of people that are past our today's retirement age has gone down. He mentions that we have more spare time. It might think that with two career couples, overscheduled kids, and our digital devices, that we don't get family dinner anymore. But the data says that we have more leisure than we had before. One of these charts, the chart in the bottom left-hand corner, was really fascinating. It shows the hours a week spent on housework. So we start out in around 1900 at 60 hours a week for housework. That has a steady decline, and it's declining. Around 1975, and then it kind of tapered off a little bit, but still is declining till today. And it shows all of the inventions that came about. That you get the invention, and then all of a sudden your housework starts going down. So running water was a big one, electricity, all the way to vacuum cleaners, microwave, stoves, washing machines. That has all helped us have more spare time. Spending on necessities, it's been a pretty steady decline in the percentage of our income that is dedicated to necessities. And that's on average. Landon pointed out a very good point earlier about, I don't know what someone fresh out of college does about housing. It's ridiculous. I don't know. But on average, numbers are getting better. Something else is just think about the connection we have to others. Things are tending toward costing nothing. I think we can all remember a long distance call. I remember, oh no, this is a long distance call. Hurry up and talk and get off. Those used to cost. And now if you have a phone, you can make a call to your mom across the country just as easily as you can next door. We have video calls, which are cool. You couldn't get that years ago, and our travel costs are down. Landon mentioned how uncomfortable the plane was, but the alternative would have been boat. And the reality is we have experiences available to us that they far surpass the abilities of the wealthiest people of the past. So we have a great quality of life, better now than ever before. Happiness. Are we happier? We sure ought to be. But we always hear about happiness is declining. This was a fascinating chapter. There's a lot of information here. But Pinker's claim is that it seems to be that there's more of an absolute, there's more of a correlation to wealth than what I would have guessed. It's hard to measure. If you ask someone, it can change based on mood. There's a lot of things that are going to change that. But life, health, freedom, those are all prerequisites that can be measured. And happy and meaningful lives go together. This chart on the bottom left, it's kind of hard to digest, but it's for number one, it's in a log scale, which shows percentages rather than like absolute increases. But what the point is that you've got this line here going down the middle of them. That's kind of the average. And wealthier countries tend to have more life satisfaction. So we've got income here on the horizontal axis and life satisfaction on the vertical axis. Those are correlated. He did mention that the USA is actually lower than other countries. I think his hypothesis was religion. He does make a claim later that religion actually correlates with less happiness. Suicide it can seem like a good measure of happiness, although that is questionable. It is the number 10 leading cause of death in the US, and it does increase during economic tough times. Something that I found fascinating about this chart is this has been something that I've been concerned about, because everyone is starting these charts around 2000 when I've done my research on, are we getting happier? And I've been using this as a metric. They always start the chart at 2000. If you'll notice, that's at a bottom. And so, of course, if you start your data in 2000, it is going to look like we are getting less happy based on that statistic. But what you can see is since 1900, it's not increasing in the long term. And so, as we look at numbers, sometimes it does depend on how the data is presented to us. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Chapter 19 is on existential threats. And he poses the question, what's the harm in existential threats? Well, there is harm there. They can convince us not to take care of what's important. I think it was Joe that mentioned that earlier. I think might not have been Joe. Anyway, just the point that we have a planet to take care of. It was Ron that mentioned that. We need to take care of that. If we think the world's going to end in 10 years, we don't have that problem. I certainly have felt that. A lot of existential threats can be self-fulfilling prophecies. An example of that is the nuclear arms race that wasn't so long ago. And globally, 15% of people think they're going to see the end of the world. And at the end of the day, extinction is our destiny. We live on a planet that someday that sun will go out. So what are we going to do? Well, maybe technology can save us. We don't know. Can we destroy asteroids? We're trying. I think we have some technologies that can possibly lead to cooling volcanoes. Some of these natural disasters, we have an ability to maybe someday thwart some of those threats. He talks about artificial intelligence, which I personally am very afraid of. So he kind of put me a little bit to ease there with that. But we do project our motivations as humans onto intelligence. There's also the problem of automation. Are they going to take my job? And just so you know, the Luddites, if you haven't heard about them, they destroyed textile machinery because they said, oh no, this loom is going, all our jobs are going. So, I mean, you can be worried about it, but I don't know. We seem so far to be pretty resilient, pretty able to adapt to what we need to adapt to. The thing about the AI that put me to ease is the more complex a system, the more people are required to weaponize it. He said there are so many low-hanging acts of terror. It would be so much easier for people to implement than some of these things that we're dreaming up. It really wouldn't be that hard, and it's our humanity that is actually saving us. And so worrying about complex problems is sometimes not the best use of your time. He does point out nuclear weapons are a real existential threat, but keep in mind that threat has been declining. Okay, and then the future of progress. He just kind of recaps: life has never been safer, healthier, wealthier, freer, etc. There are still poor. There are people that are depressed. There are hate crimes, but hopefully we can continue to progress. There will be ups and downs. He also mentioned that technologies take decades before people learn how to yield their power. So you take electricity or computers. Computers in the 80s weren't that productive, but we soon learned how to use them, and now they are very productive and have led to much nicer jobs for most of us. He also talks about populism as a counter-Enlightenment movement. He mentioned Brexit and Trump as being populist movements, and that those stuff like that will come up. But he expects that we will continue to progress. Okay, any questions on that section? That looks like a no. All right, we're gonna move on for the sake of time.
Yeah, I was trying to get to there. I just had a comment on chapter 18. The amazing thing to me was, as I looked at all, we just had 20 chapters of why the world is such a better place. And yet chapter 18 from the chart, we're not any happier. I just was wondering if anyone had any clues as to why we're not getting happier. Is it that we don't know this information? Are we not seeing it? Because it definitely, you look at it and it should make us happy, but that's the one data that didn't seem to correlate with what we were seeing in the rest of the book.
Yeah, and I think, oh, sorry, did you have more? I had a comment on your comment. Thanks, Landon. Yeah, and I think a good book was it. What's that? Oh, the Happiness Hypothesis, Jonathan Haidt, right? That's a pretty good one. If you haven't read that, Bruce.
Yeah, I just had a comment on Landon's comment. Yeah, I think we have a hard time having accurate perspective. I read someplace that a current modern life now would be compared, to several hundred years ago as having the equivalent of 400 servants. I mean, I have this heating system that is going in the background. I have central heating, I have electricity, I have clean water, I have a hot shower, I have, safe everything. And it would have required 400 servants to give somebody several hundred years ago the luxuries that I have. But then on a really personal basis, since separating from the Mormon church and getting a better understanding of how the world works and my place in it, I am infinitely happier than I was all the time I was growing up. Infinitely happier. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. Yep. Mylene.
One of the things that we know about happiness is that as you get to the point where you get more comforts and more time to yourself, you also have more time to ruminate and compare yourself to other people. And so self-reporting happiness is very unreliable in terms of, like Bruce said, compare yourself to what it would have been, several hundred years ago.
Yes, exactly. That is a very good point. Thank you. Jackie.
I think we have a real intersection with this chapter on happiness with just mental health. And as we all know, mental health has to be done individually. And, shadow work, it's all individual. And so to data mine it is pretty tough. And we know that mental health, it's like you said with the computers in the 80s, it wasn't that great. Everybody's kind of trying to figure it out. We're just now honing in on effective mental health. And then we're still dealing with all the addiction. So I think it's really, really hard to get clear data because the intersections are just very different. But I think there's no question that we have the Eeyores in the world and we have the glass empty and the glass full. And we also know that we're responsible for our own happiness. So I think it's just too complex to really see clear data. But I think all of us can see if we're critical thinkers, we will figure out how to make us as healthy and happy as we can be if we ground into critical thinking and tools that really work.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thanks everyone for those comments. Okay, this is the last section. I'm going to try to hurry. This is the part I wanted the most time to talk on, and it was really a chapter, but we'll try. Okay, so this is kind of finishing up his book. Talks about, I can't see my title, Reason, Science and Humanism. Okay, so this one's on reason. He talks a lot about just how we as humans reason. We evolved before science, but we are a species that has relied on reasoning of ideas. He does point out that our political and religious ideologies affect our beliefs on issues more than reason do. And I don't know. I know I've told blue lies before. It's for the benefit of the in group. It's when someone asks you, as a missionary, how, oh, I'm so happy to be a member of the church type stuff. That is probably true, but you would never say, no, I hate it. You always give it the benefit of the doubt. So that's what a blue lie is. Our motivated reasoning leads us to a favored conclusion rather than following to where it leads. Once we hear a stat that shows our side, sometimes we're done listening to stats, and that's what we're going to go with. And if you've ever been to a sports game, it's so fun to cry foul when yell at the refs when you don't think it's a foul, but it's always just one way. It just seems to never. No one yells when the penalty's on the other team. They did a study on both sides of a gun study. They just show that the way that you interpret the data it just depends on your politics. For a lot of people, that's how they did that. He also pointed out that expertise doesn't mean you'll come to the truth. They had a forecasting tournament where they got experts in a field. They had this forecasting tournament from 2011 to 2015, and they found that the worst people at forecasting were the ones with big ideas, left wing or right wing. The closer to the area of expertise, the worse they did. The best people at forecasting were those that drew from diverse resources. They used probabilities and not certainties, and they admitted to being wrong and looked for holes in their reasoning. So we could take a lesson from that type of people and try to be able to be better at reasoning. Let's see. And then just last thing, he kind of points out how do we foster an intellectual and political culture that is driven by reason rather than tribalism? And then the two things that he pointed out were education and not politicizing issues. Those are things that can help us reason better. Chapter 22 is science. Science should be named the proudest accomplishment of humans. It's for eradicating diseases. We're understanding the cosmos. We're sequencing the DNA of Neanderthals. Very cool stuff. We should be very proud of that as a human race. Very cool stuff. First principle of science is you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest one to fool. We're usually wrong, but good science helps us understand that. And that's a humbling thought. When you go into an experiment, you're probably wrong. Can you be a scientist enough to go where the data leads, not where you want it to lead you? He points out the two ideals of science being that the world is intelligible. It's the why, not the and it's not because I said so. So we can understand this world. Science is not, it's not just breaking problems down into simpler problems. It's trying to understand what is at the root of it. And we must allow the world to tell us if our ideas are correct or not. We should rely on Bayesian thinking, not dogmas, faith, conventional wisdom. He had he mentioned there's a lot of scorn for science by right and left wing ideologies. They're funding research on climate change and stoking fears about nuclear power. Those are two examples that he pointed out. Scientific discoveries about nature and man are undermining our traditional religions and moral teachings and understandings as creatures with freedom. A threat to our humanity is not in the transmigration of souls in the next life, but the denial of soul in this one. So it's kind of a right-wing scorn for science. And then science forces us to take our welfare into our own hands and not God's. He points out that liberal arts in many universities are poisoning students against science. He mentioned the second most popular book in university is Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and that it teaches that scientific theories come and go when new theories disavow the old one. There was a lot there in that chapter. If you only read a few chapters of this book, 21, 22, and 23 are the ones to read. Okay, the last chapter, and this one I took 2 slides on this one. I couldn't get it all in one. This is on humanism. We've talked about science and reasoning and how those go hand in hand, but science is not enough to bring about progress. That's not going to do it. It brings vaccines, it brings bioweapons. It can help us record events that are going to be memorable. It also allows us to be monitored by Big Brother. And the list goes on. But humanism, though, kind of is a way to help us with that. It has the goal of maximizing human flourishing. This is done through love, life, health, happiness, freedom, knowledge, richness of experience. I think everyone in the world can agree that those are good things, that's what we should strive for. And what humanism does is provides the ought from the is. It provides good without God and resolving conflicts cooperatively without violence. Even this conversation that we're having here today is just, like he points out, there's staggering odds that we've arranged ourselves into a thinking organ, being products of a natural selection, the only physical process capable of producing complex adaptive design, and must have defied entropy long enough to show up for discussion and persist through it. So this conversation is just proof of amazing, it should be awe-inspiring. This means that we've taken energy from our environment, we've stayed within a narrow envelope consistent with its integrity, and defended off assaults from living and non-living dangers. So we talked about a few months ago about utilitarianism. He mentions that humanistic morality has a utilitarian flavor. We acts are evaluated with their consequences. And he also points out that although humanism is moral code for rational people across multiple cultures to converge upon, it clashes with theism and romantic heroism. All right, good without God. There we are. We're going to hell in a handbasket. That's what that picture is. Not having internal punishment leads to stealing, lying, and murder. That's, I probably would have agreed with that 5 years ago. He points out there's really no good reason. So Pinker says there's no good reason to believe in God. Scriptures are products of human thinking filled with error. This universe relies on precise constants that would make our world uninhabitable were it not for God. That's one of the arguments against. I guess he's trying to give arguments against humanism here. And his answer for that is, what is the divine purpose of volcanoes, floods, and famine? If those precise constants were set by God, why would he set those things? Why would he make that part of this world? The fact that we exist implies the universe is such that it supports life. If someone has to win the lottery, and so the fact that we have these constants that are so precise for life, well, there's billions of worlds, at least. One of us is going to win the lottery, and one of them is going to support life. And the fact that we're here says that it does. He also points out that the God of the Old Testament commanded mass rape and genocide, but it frowned upon working on the Sabbath, homosexuality, adultery, and blasphemy. And so he's saying that you must read the Bible through the lens of humanism if you're going to pull out the good that is in there, that you can't just take it all in. Now, with that being said, he did say that religions should not be praised nor condemned across the board. His solution for going forward would be to leave behind the supernatural dogma and keep the arts, rituals, and community. He points out that religion's answers to deep questions are shallow, and also that an alternative to religion is not science. Spirituality should be gratitude for existence, awe for the grandeur of the universe, and humility for our understanding. Which I think I can agree with all those. The largest growing religion is no religion at all. So he did point that out. As being the reason that people are moving away from religion is a lack of belief in the teachings. He also pointed out that wealthy nations are the least religious, again, with the USA being the exception. So a lot there in those last chapters. Again, those are the only ones you read. Those are the ones to read. I really like that last part. Do we have comments on that? We're almost out of time, but yeah, comments on that last section. All right, Bruce.
Yeah, I just thought this last section gives me kind of some comfort in a way that I've moved towards this in my understanding of the world, and that I'm not just the only one who has had some of these thoughts, and his reinforcing this whole narrative from the book, I find comforting.
Thank you. Jackie.
Yes, I'm with you. I just thought, especially the chapters on reason and science were fabulous. I just thought he constructed them so well, and I'd recommend them to anybody. And I loved how he just finished with religion just being gratitude and awe. I think when we keep things very big, just a few concepts big, we can make, like, quote, spirituality work. And when we start trying to define and micro everything, it just falls apart, the arguments. But I was just so appreciative of this book. And I just want to throw out, so in 2008, right after that, a book called The Black Swan was written. And it was about the crash in 2008 and the economy and how no one saw it coming. And that's a black swan. And you can forecast for all you're worth, but nobody sees the black swan, meaning that every so often a black swan is born in a white swan, in that form of animals. And so I think that's the problem with AI. Like, you can think of every scenario known to man with a self-driving car, but will you come up with the black swan? And so I just kind of read this book, so hopeful, and I really believe it. I'm 90% with it, but I've always got this black swan in my back mind of what could come up that could crash it all. And so that's kind of what I wanted to throw out to everybody. How are your feelings on it? And I'm such a skeptic now, and I was not a natural critical thinker, so I don't have the skills. So I just kind of wanted to know what people thought. And Kevin, you did a fantastic job. It's such a great book. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Rebecca.
Yeah, I really appreciated the last couple of chapters because I take, whenever I find one of those quizzes that says, what are you? Are you religious? Are you an atheist? You answer all the questions. And I always come up with secular humanist, and which I thought, okay, that sounds good. I'm not exactly sure what it is. So the book kind of went through step by step. What is that? And I was reading going, exactly, that's exactly it. That's it. So it helped me now have something to say when my friends and relatives say, well, what are you now? In not a very nice way. I'm like, well, I am a proud secular humanist, and this is what it means. And the other of your comments from this section that I thought were important is when you talked about getting information, taking in information from all different sources so you can make decisions and not being in that vacuum. And that's part of being a humanist. And I thought about a couple of years ago, they leaked some video of how the top leaders of the church get their information. In a way, this sort of, to me, absolves them of some of the things they're doing. They basically have other people go through news sources, things like that, synthesize the information, bring to them a presentation on what is important for the top leaders to know. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the information is synthesized through, it was a straight white guy, who walked in and told them what was going on, news of the day. So, they've isolated and insulated themselves to the point where they couldn't possibly forecast anything for their membership who's looking to them to tell them directions to go and what to do. So I think recognizing that, we can be very careful ourselves to, go to diverse sources, have groups like this where we discuss things and try to arrive at things that are good for ourselves, for others. I just think it's so important. So yeah, I absolutely love the end of the book. And if you did not have a chance, like Kevin said, to read the whole thing, at least go through those chapters. Those, to me, were sort of life-changing. I absolutely love them.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was a tough book to get through when you had to make notes and stuff. But hopefully I tried to just throw out all the information there. Hopefully that worked out. So anyway, yeah, and then Jackie's comment, Black Swan. See, I'm there with you, Jackie. I have a concern about that stuff too. And I think Pinker kind of mentioned the book. I probably didn't say anything about it, but it's like, this is the data, this is where it's going, but that doesn't mean that, an asteroid could come tomorrow. We may not even know that it's even there, right? Or, there's a number of things that could happen. So yeah, I'm there with you, Jackie, on the Black Swan. So.
I gotta keep it there. I want it low, like I said, I'm 90% positive, but I've got that 10% Black Swan, like,
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah, thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Everybody clap for Kevin. That was
Yeah.
absolutely,
sure.
And what a tough book.
Clap.
But, oh my gosh, no. And there are not a lot of summaries of this book out there or anything like this, because I Googled trying to see, because I think it's really hard to take on. So if we put this out there, this may become the #1, 2-hour version of Steven Pinker's book. I'm not kidding. There really isn't a lot out there because there's just so much. No, this is absolutely incredible. Let's quickly go to our final slides, and then we'll move on to where we just kind of get together and talk about everything we've learned today. So again, thank you. Kevin. That was absolutely amazing. I think we do have some final slides. If we can, I can't say a word without my slides. I can't remember where we are. So there we go. Thank you, Kevin. There's our final slide on Steven Pinker. That was absolutely amazing. Let's see, moving to the next one. We are now going to have a preview of our book coming up for April, and our discussion leader is Sean. So let's hear from Sean for a few minutes to tell us about this wonderful book we're going to be reading next.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so here we are. It's already almost April, and I thought it would be a great idea to take on this book. I knew it would be a challenge for me, and it certainly has turned out to be that. So next month, we're going to have kind of a personal journey, and we'll get ready to follow one active but skeptical Mormon's journey from nuance to critical thinking as we examine and discuss the reliability of various sources and objective look, the science behind our beliefs and biases, behavior manipulation, pattern formation, and thought reform, emotional and psychological damage that can and does result. It's kind of heavy stuff here, but then we'll top it off with how we may recover. And I would just like to add that this has been a very emotional book for me. I approached it with a healthy dose of skepticism, and was overwhelmed by the abundance of evidence that Lindsay Corbin presents in this book, which was really a remarkable book. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend doing it. And Rebecca, you have just increased my stress level from a 6 to about a 10 by announcing that she might act, or that Luna goes by they, that Luna may actually be joining us for this discussion. So thank you for that.
No problem. These things come up. But Sean, you and I will talk as the month goes on what she might want to do as far as being involved. So, and if she does come in, it would just be briefly and you'd be able to do your presentation. But yeah, anything can happen in book club. I think that's what we learned. Anything can happen.
Well, I'm actually really excited to hear that that's a possibility. I've been thinking about reaching out to them because I have a Kindle version of this book, and for some reason doesn't show all the images. So I was going to see if there's some way to get a hold of images, and I just wanted to let Luna know that I was going to be doing this. So we'll chat afterwards. I'll maybe get their contact information from you if that's a possibility. But the amazing thing about this book is it's kind of personally, see, I'm still very, very closeted, but I'm finding that this book is kind of forcing me out of the closet a little bit, which is maybe a good thing. So it'll be an interesting discussion. I'm really looking forward to discussing with all you fine folks next month.
Great.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. And I think you actually are the perfect person to do this book. And it sounds like it has really been a journey for you. And so we're really looking forward to hearing from you and what you're comfortable sharing with us. And we're just really excited that you grabbed this book right away when we put all the books up for grab at the beginning. So wonderful. So I guess we'll just end. If you are not a member of the book club, but just zoomed in with us because I put the dang link everywhere, you can connect with us. You can find us. First, you can send me just an email, oldschool@thegoodbookclub@mail.com, and I'll write you back and tell you how to connect more. You can find us on Facebook. That's our logo there with all the books. You can connect. We do a lot on Facebook just through the month, chatting about the books together and posting interesting tidbits and just other things we come across. So that's fun. You can also find us on Instagram, where we also put information, and we're sort of on TikTok, working on that. But anyway, we'd love it if you join us because we just have an amazing, wonderful group of people. If you do shoot me an email, I always have this slide up because it always goes to spam. I don't know why, but mark it so we're not spam, but we're safe. So, and that ends our official part of the book club. Now, for those of you that are new or haven't been here before, we just love to talk, and we're always determined to have our own 3-hour block. So please stay on with us, and we'll just very informally chat. Everybody can unmute their mic, and that's it.